Hello and welcome to the third model in the Sinister Six series by Epic Prop. All these models can be picked up through its Patreon. The link's on the screen and also in the description for you guys. So let's jump right in. I started painting the bricks on this base using the following colors. I used Apple Barrel Barn Red. This is craft paint. I also used Army Painter Ash Gray and Matte Black, along with Vallejo Model Air Mud Brown. These are my go-to colors for bricks. I also use this same combination on the Vulture base. For the concrete and rubble, I like to use Ash Gray as the base color. I also like to use it for highlighting the bricks. Go back over those areas with the Barn Red, and it just gives a brighter red without having to actually get a different paint to use. You know, like highlights are supposed to work. I make random patterns for these highlights. I also do that with the brown and the black, just to make different shadows and different shades all throughout the model. This gives the bricks a more natural pattern and also helps with the weathering. Also use the black to accentuate the shadows and to get into the larger cracks and broken areas. And this all just compiles together to be weathering effects. So this power box was really fun to paint. I was able to get real creative with it. I started with Vallejo's metal color dark aluminum, or aluminium as my UK friends call it. And for the simple fact that I can't be expected to hit record every time I pick up the paintbrush, I use black off camera for the inside of the panel and to add burn marks where the panel had been damaged. We all know the internal cables on boxes like this are typically black or gray, and that's just boring, so I went with the most popular bomb wiring colors for these internal cables to really give it a nice pop. No specific brand or colors, I just went with red, blue, green, yellow, and brown. I painted the inside of the dial area white, and I used panel liner to begin weathering the box. I hit all the little nuts and bolts holding the panel together, and then along the hard edges where the panel pieces meet. Then use it to also accent the lettering that's inside the dial area. Once the panel liner dried, I put a slathering of Army Painter Strong Tone wash over the entire box. This really helps with the weathering of the box. When you're putting this on, I try to make the coverage inconsistent. I like to have it thicker in some areas and lighter in others, and I also will sponge certain areas off first so that the wash doesn't sit there as long, thus giving it a lighter wash effect. This, in my mind, makes it look like this area is more used and less weathered because it's been touched more and the dirt and the grime hasn't really settled in those areas. The dial was not modeled with a cover, so I decided to make one out of clear resin. I did this by putting in thin layers and curing each of them all the way up and through. Because of its depth, if you try to do it all at once, you'll end up with bubbles in the bottom and have to pull it out with tweezers and start all over. At least that's what my friend told me. Yes, that is a popsicle stick, and yes, that is the dark aluminum paint again. I like to use popsicle sticks on these hard edges because it just works better for me than a brush. I also go around the edges of where the panel has been damaged. This gives it that fresh metal, busted open look. I printed the broken window in clear resin, and everyone knows when you print clear resin and wash and cure it, it becomes opaque. Just be careful not to over cure it or it will become opaque and yellow. To make the glass sections clearer, I'll brush on a thin coat of clear resin and cure it with a handheld UV light. Just be sure to apply the resin to both sides so that you get the full transparency all the way through the piece. Just be sure to wipe off any residue once you're done curing everything. You can also dip it in IPA real quick just to give it a quick rinse. Don't leave it in IPA too long or it'll turn opaque again. And I also put on a clear varnish once all that's done and it's dried to be sure that I can handle the piece without worrying about getting anything on my hands. I base coat the window with Army Painter Oak Brown. It's a nice deep brown, even though it looks like it's not very deep going on here because it's being painted onto a clear piece. I started to brush it on by hand, then decided to just tape the windows and spray it on with the airbrush. This was way faster and it covered a whole lot better. Here I'm dry brushing on mud brown just to bring up some highlights. I removed the tape so that I can weather the glass itself along with the rest of the windowsill. I go with matte black to give it a grimy look, get down the little nooks and crannies where the glass meets the frame, and to just kind of brush over the top side of the glass itself. I only did the top side of the glass because if I did the other side it would make it too dirty and would mess up the illusion that it's real glass. If this window had been sitting up where you could see both sides of it on the piece versus one side facing down, I would have definitely weathered the other side just a little bit, but since it's not, there's no benefit to painting the other side. Once it's had some time to dry, I glue it into place. It's a bit of a tight fit, but it just pops right in. That's all together. I grab a fan brush and some matte black and start weathering it in together and blending this so it looks like it has always been one piece versus two. To finish up the base, I grab some Vallejo Model Air Gray Blue and use a makeup brush to kind of splotch it onto all the concrete and rubble areas. This gives it a non-distinct pattern. Since I'm not painting it this color, I'm just adding this color to the bottle. I also use this color to go over the bricks just to add additional weathering. Back with mud brown for the rubble. Also come back on top of this with Mission Models Red Oxide to give it a more brick tone in that rubble as well. While these colors are mixed on the brush, I go over the electrical box as well and the rubble that's on the base. This just is all going toward the weathering process of this base to blend it all together into this environment. From there, I use the strong tone wash again. This really gets all the nooks and crannies and gets really deep into the recesses and just makes it look dirty. Now I come in with a soft tone and really target the little cracks and busted pieces of the brick. I want a lot of this in there. I don't want it dark, but I just want a lot of saturation. From there, I just covered the entire model with the soft wash. What this does is it blends all the previous weathering colors and things that have been added to this, it blends them all together. It brings the highs down, it brings the lows up, and gives it a single age look, like everything aged at the same time and was weathered together. And don't forget the accessories. You always have to do the accessories. If it's supposed to match the base, you need to do the same weathering, you need to do the same coloring as you do with the main base so that it all blends together in the end. With the base completed and now out of the way, I can start on the Green Goblin. I use Createx Transparent Green over a white primer. This took 2 coats, but it turned out pretty well. For the body, I used Army Painter's Alien Purple as a base coat for the suit. This was a nice deep purple, kind of a good place to start. And then I went with Army Painter Violent Volt to make my midtones. Then from there, Army Painter's Warlock Purple for the highlights. After the highlights, I ended up with a Green Goblin Barbie, which I did not want. So I took the Alien Purple, mixed it with some water to make a glaze, and went over the entire suit again. I believe it took 2 coats to get it to where I wanted it, but that really brought those pink tones back down to a Green Goblin highlight versus a Barbie. For the body highlights, I used Custom Creative Energy Green base coat. This is probably as close to yellow as you can get and still call it green, but it really was spot on for the highlights that I was going for. For the mask, I started with Green Stuff's World Kraken Green. I wanted to give the face a little bit more darker tones versus the rest of the suit to kind of, help it stand out. For the midtones, I use a new product from a Kickstarter from Scale 75. It's their drop and paint set. This is called Irati Green. Also for the highlights, I use light olive green from the same paint set. This is the first time I've used this paint, obviously, because it's from a Kickstarter, but you put it right in out of the bottle and it just sprays beautifully. Wonderful stuff. And I am open to sponsorship. For teeth, and with all teeth, I do a base coat of mummy robes. That's just a really good starting point for teeth, in my opinion. A lot of people go with gray, but I found that mummy robes is a good midpoint between gray and white. I started with a dark red in the mouth, and then decided to go over that with matte black. Since this is a mask that really fit the character a lot better and matched up with the comics. For the eyes, I used Army Painter Demonic Yellow. It only took 2 coats to get the saturation I wanted.
Think about it, hero!
My new favorite color for base coating leather is Green Stuff World's Cocoa Brown. This stuff goes on, it's a nice chocolatey brown, and it paints super easy. I do have other browns, but the mud brown just works so good for the tones that I'm trying to achieve here. You can use whatever brown you want, but the mud brown works very well for highlighting leather for me. For the buckles on his belt, I used Army Painter's Shining Silver. This is kind of my go-to when I don't want it to be chrome. I just want it to look metallic. I went back and painted the belt strap black. I originally thought it was part of the satchel, which is why I painted it brown. Once I realized that, I couldn't just leave it there. Not that it would have really mattered because it's not a part of the model that really stands out, but I like to pay attention to details on some of these models, even though I probably have overlooked some. But in my mind, this color change makes it stand out as, yeah, this is a different piece of clothing, so it's a different color for that reason. So I've recently started using pastels, and these things are amazing. I used the blue and purple to blue the end of the rocket to give it a heated metal tint, and right here I'm adding black to give it a sooted look from the smoke and the pollution coming from this guy. And while I was doing this, I was live streaming in Discord. One of my best friends, John See No Evil from Evil Prince, you need to check him out. He does amazing work. So he sees me using these pastels, and he suggests that I try to use those to make a reflection of the Goblin onto the glider. And I thought that was just the craziest thing I'd ever heard, but I thought I'd give it a try. So I'll start with a light blue, and that kind of tints the metal a little bit, and then I add a little bit of dark blue on top of that, and it immediately turns purple and starts working. It's just the craziest thing I've ever seen happen. So I left this entire process in the video. It pushed the video a few minutes longer than I wanted it to be, but it's so amazing I just had to leave it in. Hey, if you like what you see, this is just a reminder to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below, hit the notification bell. I don't post videos very often, so I'd hate for you to miss something. I'm also considering doing live feeds next year, so I would really hate for you to miss those. So I put the Goblin on the glider just to see where I needed to put the shadowing and the reflections on there, just to kind of fill in the gaps. And once we get to the glamour shots, you can really see how this turned out. And with that done, it's time for those glamour shots. We've reached a part in the video where I want to thank my Patreon supporters. Yes, I actually have those now. Starting with my #1 fan and painting consultant, Paula Burgess, Jamie the Hulk Williams, Rosie Printer Witch, and Pop. Thank you all for your support. All money that goes into the Patreon goes directly back into the channel. It definitely does not go to a custom model that is not shared with anyone.